When I was 18, I made one of the stupidest decisions of my life. I tried to steal a phone from a large retail store. Even saying that out loud still makes me feel embarrassed. I wasn't some hardened criminal. I wasn't desperate. I wasn't thinking. I was just a dumb kid with two friends, acting like we were braver than we really were. The plan was ridiculous from the beginning. Open the packaging, slip the phone into my jacket pocket, walk out calmly like nothing happened. That was it. That was the entire plan. And it failed before I even reached the doors. A loss prevention officer stepped in front of me near the exit and told me to come with him. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I was going to throw up. I had no idea they had been watching me the whole time. An hour later, I was sitting in the back of a police car with my hands cuffed behind me, staring out at the same parking lot I had walked into earlier like an ordinary person. It was a Friday night. That made everything worse. At first, I kept telling myself my parents would come pick me up. Maybe I would get a fine. Maybe they would scare me and let me go home. But after they took me to the station, processed me, fingerprinted me, and asked their questions, I was told court would not be open until Monday, which meant I was spending the weekend in county jail over a stolen phone. I remember the exact feeling when they said it. My whole body went cold. I had never been in serious trouble before. I had never been arrested. I had never even been suspended from school. And suddenly, I was being walked into a jail in handcuffs because of the most humiliating mistake of my life. Booking felt like it lasted forever. They took my wallet, my shoes, my belt, my clothes. Then they handed me an orange jumpsuit. That was the moment it became real. I remember changing into it and seeing myself for half a second in a scratched-up metal mirror. I looked like someone else. When they brought me into the holding area, I understood immediately that I did not belong there. I don't mean that like I thought I was better than anyone. I just mean I looked young, terrified, and completely out of place. The other men looked older, bigger, rougher. Some were covered in tattoos. Some were laughing like jail was just another Friday night for them. A few looked at me like I had already annoyed them by existing. Someone called me pretty boy. Another guy laughed and asked if I missed my mother already. I tried not to react. I stared at the floor and pretended I was calm. But I know everyone could see I was scared. Later, a new group of people was brought in, and we were told we could make phone calls. I called home. My mother answered. The second I heard her voice, I almost broke. I told her where I was. I told her what happened. Then my father got on the phone. He didn't yell. That almost made it worse. He sounded tired, quiet, disappointed. He said they had already contacted an attorney. He said I would probably see a judge Monday and they would try to get me out after that. Monday felt like it was years away. I wanted to beg them to get me out sooner, but I knew they couldn't. After the call, I had to walk back into the day room and pretend I wasn't about to panic. That night, they assigned me to a cell. My cellmate was a man in his 40s who said his name was Ray. At first, I felt lucky. Ray wasn't shouting. He wasn't threatening anybody. He had a calm voice and spoke to me like I was just some kid who had made a bad mistake. He asked what I was in for. I told him. That was mistake number 2. He laughed and said, "That's nothing. You'll be fine." For the first hour, he actually helped me feel less alone. He told me when meals came. He told me not to stare at anybody for too long. He told me to keep my voice low, stay out of people's business, and never act too nervous. I remember thinking maybe I had gotten lucky. But that feeling didn't last. As the hours passed, Ray started acting too familiar. He asked where I lived. I gave a vague answer. He asked if I had a girlfriend. I shrugged. He asked what school I went to, whether I still lived with my parents, whether I had brothers or sisters. Every question felt harmless on its own, but together they started to feel wrong. Then he began making comments about how young I looked. He kept saying I didn't belong in a place like that. At first it sounded almost protective. Then it started sounding creepy. When we sat on the lower bunk, he sat too close. When he laughed, he touched my shoulder. Once, he put his hand on my knee like it was nothing. I moved away instantly. He smiled. Not like he was sorry, like he knew exactly what he was doing. After that, every second with the cell door closed felt unbearable. The day room was awful, but at least there were other people around. The cell was worse. The lights never really went out. There was no real night or morning, just gray walls, stale air, and the sound of men coughing, talking, and shifting in their bunks. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like Ray was watching me. At some point, I woke up and saw him leaning slightly over the top bunk, looking down at me. He whispered, "Can't sleep either." I didn't answer. I just stared at the wall until he finally rolled over. Those 2 days felt longer than any week of my life. By Monday morning, I was exhausted, ashamed, and desperate to leave. I barely remember the hearing. I remember standing there in front of the judge. I remember hearing words about bail and release. And I remember my father picking me up later that day. When I got into his car, he didn't yell. He just looked at me for a second and said, "Let's go home." I didn't talk about jail. I didn't mention Ray. I didn't mention the way he looked at me or the way I felt trapped in that cell. I just wanted a shower, clean clothes, and my own bed. I wanted to pretend the whole thing had been a nightmare. But a few days later, I learned it wasn't over. Part 2-4. A few days after I got out, I received a follow request on Instagram. My profile was public back then, so random requests were not unusual. But this account felt off. No real name. No posts. No followers that made sense. The profile photo was just a dark, blurry room. I ignored it. Later that night, the account sent me a message. When I opened it, my heart nearly stopped. It was a selfie. Ray. His face was too close to the camera, wearing that same little smile he had given me in the cell. Under the photo, he had typed, "Miss you already." I blocked him immediately and threw my phone onto the bed like it had burned me. I felt sick. He knew my real name. He had found my profile, and I had no idea how. 2 days later, I came home from work in the late afternoon. It was foggy outside, and my parents were both still at work. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed an old beat-up car parked across the street. Someone was sitting inside. Their head was down. They didn't move. I sat in my car for a few seconds, watching. I couldn't see the person's face, but something about it felt wrong. I hurried inside and locked the door behind me. A few minutes later, I was standing in the kitchen trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. Then, I heard the front doorknob move. Not a knock. Not the doorbell. The knob turned slowly back and forth, like someone was testing whether it was unlocked. I froze. Then, it stopped. Less than a minute later, the back door knob did the same thing. That was when I called emergency services. I whispered at first because I was terrified whoever was outside might hear me. I told the dispatcher someone was trying to get into my house. While I was still on the phone, the doorbell rang. The dispatcher asked if I could see who it was. I said no. I told her I thought it might be a man I had shared a jail cell with. She told me not to answer the door. By the time the officers arrived, the car was gone. Whoever had been at the door was gone too. I told the police everything. The arrest, the jail, Ray, the Instagram message, the car outside, the doorknobs. The second I admitted I had recently been in jail, I felt their attitude change. They weren't openly rude, but they didn't seem eager to take me seriously. One officer asked if I was sure I wasn't just shaken up from the weekend. That made me angry. Another asked if I had given the man my full name. I told them no. They gave me a report number. That was basically it. For the next week, nothing happened. I tried to convince myself it was over. Then one night, I went to a small bar with a few friends. These were not the friends who knew about the arrest. Outside my family and the people who had been there that night, I had told nobody. We were standing near a pool table when I glanced toward the far end of the bar. Ray was sitting alone. He had a baseball cap pulled low and a dark jacket zipped up like he was trying not to be noticed. But I knew it was him. At first, he wasn't looking at me. Then he lifted his head. Our eyes met. And he smiled. My friends noticed my face change immediately. They asked what was wrong. I lied. I said there was someone there I didn't want to talk to and that I wanted to leave. We walked out through the front. The whole time, I expected Ray to follow us. In the parking lot, I told my friends I was getting a ride home and asked them to wait until it arrived. The second I got into the car, I called my parents. That was when I finally told them everything I had been hiding. The Instagram message, the door, the bar. That night, my parents took me straight to the police station. This time, with them there and with a screenshot of the message, the police took it more seriously. I gave a sworn statement. Eventually, I was able to get a temporary restraining order. That was also when I learned Ray was not his real name. I won't say the real one. I also learned how easy it can be for someone to find arrest information once a person has been booked. My guess is that after he got released, he searched public records and found enough to track me down. The restraining order seemed to work. I never saw him again. But that weekend stayed with me for years. Getting arrested was humiliating, and it could have damaged my life in obvious ways. But the worst part was not the court date. It was realizing that one reckless decision had put me in a locked room with someone who should never have had access to me, and somehow that access followed me home. The next story is harder for me to tell. I still struggle to write about it without feeling my chest tighten. Whenever I think too long about what could have happened to my friend Maya and me, I start spiraling. So I'll start at the beginning. Last summer, I was dating a guy who lived about an hour away. It didn't last long. Honestly, it was a rebound. The only reason he matters to this story is because of the drive to his house. Most of the road was empty. Trees, fields, long stretches with no houses. About 15 minutes before reaching his place, there was a huge old building in the distance. It looked like something from an old horror movie. Tall, arched roofs, narrow windows, a massive cross fixed to the highest point. Every time I passed it, I wanted to know what it was. I asked him once. He said he thought it might have been an old prison or some kind of institution, but he didn't really know. He'd grown up nearby and said it had always been abandoned. He didn't care enough to find out. That was one of the many differences between us. I saw that building once and couldn't stop thinking about it. After we stopped talking, the building stayed in my mind. I told my friend Maya about it. She became just as curious as I was. We tried searching online, but we couldn't find a clear answer. Maybe we didn't search hard enough. Neither of us was great at digging through old records. When easy answers didn't appear, we gave up on research, but not on the building. That was when Maya said, "Why don't we just go look?" I laughed at first. Then I realized she was serious. She said it wasn't far. If it was abandoned, nobody would be there. I wasn't sure. I don't live on the edge. I don't break into places. I don't enjoy risks. But somehow, going at night seemed like the smarter idea at the time. I thought if anyone watched the place, they would probably be gone after dark. Looking back, that logic was ridiculous. But that was how my brain justified it. A few nights later, Maya and I drove out there. We packed flashlights. We put fresh batteries in them. We told ourselves it would be an adventure. Maya parked on the side of the road instead of pulling up to the building. She said if there were cameras, we didn't want the car visible. The walk from the road to the front entrance took almost 10 minutes. The closer we got, the bigger the building looked, and the more wrong it felt. When we reached the front door, I searched for a sign. Anything. A name. A warning. A plaque. There was nothing. Even standing right in front of it, we still couldn't tell what the building had been. Maya tried the door. To my surprise, it opened. There was a lock attached, but it wasn't latched. The smell hit us immediately. Dust, damp wood, mold, something old and sour underneath it all. Our flashlights cut through the darkness, and the beams were full of floating dust. A few steps inside, the place started making sense. Straight ahead was a heavy door with bars in the window and a large rusted lock hanging from it. Except that door wasn't locked either. It wasn't even fully closed. That was when I started feeling anxious. Maya kept moving, so I followed. We passed through a few smaller rooms, then entered a large chamber lined with cells. There were pieces of ceiling and wall scattered everywhere, broken boards, rusted metal, old paper, chunks of plaster. The building looked like it was slowly collapsing into itself. Maya wanted to keep exploring. I wanted to leave. I told her the ceiling could come down at any second. She laughed and called me dramatic. She wasn't completely wrong, but I was scared for a reason. She promised we would only stay a little longer. I agreed, even though every part of me wanted to turn around. Less than 3 minutes later, we heard a loud crash. It echoed through the whole building. We both stopped. I immediately panicked. Maya tried to stay calm. She said something probably fell somewhere, and the sound carried. Maybe she was right, but I didn't care anymore. I looked at her and said, "We need to go." This time, she didn't argue. We started heading back the way we came. Then, near the doorway of the cell room, Maya froze. She grabbed my arm and whispered, "Don't freak out!" Which, of course, made me freak out. At the far end of the room, about 20 feet away, a man was standing in the dark, not moving, just standing there. I cannot explain how terrifying it is to be inside an abandoned prison in the middle of the night and suddenly realize someone else is in there with you. For a moment, none of us moved. Then the man raised both hands slowly, like he was showing he didn't want trouble. He said his name was Derek. He said he didn't mean any harm. Maya immediately asked why he was there. She told him if he came any closer, we had pepper spray. We didn't. But I was grateful she said it. Derek stayed calm. Too calm. He said he was security for the property. He claimed people had been breaking in often, so the owners hired him to check the place at night. He said technically he was supposed to detain trespassers and call the police. My heart sank. I thought we were about to be arrested. But then he smiled and said he would let us off with a warning. He said we looked like decent girls who made a dumb choice. I started thanking him. Maya did not. She asked him to step aside so we could leave. That was when his expression changed just a little. He said, "I'm sorry, but you can't go out that way." Maya asked why. He said part of the ceiling had caved in near the entrance. He told us it was blocked and unsafe. He said he would take us through a back exit. I believed him because I wanted to leave. Maya didn't. As he walked closer, I noticed something strange. He was not dressed like a security guard. No uniform, no badge, no radio. He wore jeans, white sneakers, a black hoodie, and a flannel shirt over it. Maya asked why he wasn't in uniform. He laughed. He said the job was boring and the owners didn't care what he wore as long as he kept people out. His answer came too smoothly. That was what scared me later. He never stumbled. He never seemed nervous. He had explanations ready for everything. We followed him deeper into the building. That alone felt wrong. Every step seemed to take us farther from the entrance. Whenever Maya asked where we were going, he said, "Almost there." After a few minutes, we reached a narrow hallway. It was so tight that we couldn't walk side by side. At the end was a door. Derek opened it. Behind it was a staircase going down. Complete darkness. Not dim, not shadowy, black. Derek stepped aside and said, "After you." Maya stared at him. "Why would the exit be down there?" He chuckled and called her silly. That word bothered me. Silly. Like we were children. Like our fear amused him. Maya said we were not going any farther. I asked him to lead the way if it was safe. For the first time, he paused. Then he said, "Sure." He took 1 or 2 steps down, then stopped. He came back up and said he needed to make sure the door locked behind us so nobody else could get inside. As he said it, he reached for me. He grabbed my arm gently, almost politely, and tried to guide me toward the stairs. That touch broke something in Maya. She screamed and shoved him hard. Because she was standing slightly above him, he lost balance for a second. His grip slipped off my arm. Maya yelled, "Run!" So we ran. We sprinted back through the hallway, through the cell room, past the place where we had first seen him. We reached the front entrance. There was no collapsed ceiling, no blocked doorway. Nothing had caved in. Derek had lied. The entire time we ran, I couldn't hear him behind us, but it felt like he was right there. I could still feel his hand on my arm. We burst outside and ran across the field to the car. Maya started the engine before I even had my door fully closed. The whole drive home, we kept checking the mirrors. Neither of us spoke much. About a week later, I called the police in that area. I admitted we had entered the building. I told them a man claiming to be security had tried to take us into a dark basement. The officer went quiet. For a second, I thought I was in trouble. Then he said the building had no security, no guards, no cameras, no patrol. He told me whoever we met was not supposed to be there. Then he said something I still hear in my head. You and your friend are lucky you got out. I hate remembering those words. Because he was right. The worst part is that we never learned who Derek really was. He looked too clean-cut to be someone living inside an abandoned building. He spoke too confidently to seem random, and he knew exactly how to make us follow him. Sometimes, when I think about that hallway and those stairs, I feel his fingers close around my arm again. I know I will probably never get answers. I'm just grateful I'm still here to tell it. Several years after that, I moved across the country and took a job as a corrections officer at a local jail. I had only been there about a week when I met an inmate named Calvin. Calvin did not seem violent. He was locked up for a parole violation, not anything aggressive. He was polite every time I saw him. He called me sir. He followed instructions. He never caused problems. That made what happened next even stranger. One afternoon, completely out of nowhere, Calvin asked me, "How's Ryan doing?" I stopped walking. My brother's name is Ryan, but I was nearly 1,000 miles from my hometown. Nobody at that jail knew my brother's name. For a second, I just stared at Calvin. Then I ignored him and kept moving. I told myself it had to be a coincidence. Maybe he knew another Ryan. Maybe he was talking nonsense. A few days later, Calvin crossed paths with me again. This time he asked, "Does your mother still live near the water?" My mother's name is Helen, and she lives on a small lake. That was not a coincidence. I pulled him aside and asked how he knew that. He shrugged. He said he didn't know. He smiled like the whole thing was funny. In jails, inmates sometimes pass information around. They gossip. They test officers. They look for weak spots. But this was different. No one there knew me. I didn't use social media. I didn't talk about my family. I wasn't the type to share personal details with coworkers, let alone inmates. After that, I checked Calvin's file. I wondered if maybe he was from my hometown. He wasn't. According to his records, he had been born and raised in that state. There was no connection. No obvious reason he should know anything about me. Then one day, he asked about my nephew. He asked if the kid still liked baseball. That disturbed me more than anything. I went to my supervisor and told her, "Calvin was saying personal things about my family." She brushed it off. She said he was probably trying to provoke me so I would react and get in trouble, maybe sue the jail. I understood her logic, but I didn't believe it. Calvin kept being polite after that. He never threatened me. He never raised his voice. He just smiled whenever he saw me. Eventually, he was released. On his way out, he looked at me and said, "Maybe I'll see you around." I don't know why, but the way he said it made my skin crawl. A few months passed. I settled into the job. I got used to the town. I started dating someone and spent some nights at her apartment instead of my own house. One morning, while I was at her place, my phone buzzed. Someone had triggered the doorbell camera at my house. A man stood on my porch, his hood was up, and the shadows made his face hard to see. He rang the bell. Then he stood completely still. After a while, he rang again. In a soft voice, he said, "You home?" Then he started talking about selling frozen meat out of his truck. He said he was going door to door and didn't want to bother me. Then he left. It was weird, but I tried not to overthink it. People sell strange things door to door all the time. The next night, I stayed at my girlfriend's place again. A little after 2 in the morning, I got another notification. Motion at my front door. When I opened the camera feed, nobody was there. I assumed the sensor had glitched. The night after that, I was home alone because I had an early shift. At almost exactly the same time, my doorbell rang. I opened the camera feed. It was the same man, hood up, standing too close to the door. He rang again and said, "Hello, I've got meat in the truck. You should open up and see what I have." Then it looked like his hand moved toward the doorknob. That was when I spoke through the camera. I told him I worked in law enforcement and that he needed to leave my property immediately before I called it in. At first, he didn't move. Then he slowly lifted his head. The porch light caught his face, and I saw the smile. It was Calvin, the polite inmate from the jail. The man who knew things about my family that he had no way of knowing. He didn't run. He didn't panic. He simply turned around and walked away. There was no truck, no vehicle at the curb. He had lied about that too. I watched him walk into the dark until the camera lost him. The next day, I called my brother. I asked if he knew anyone named Calvin. He didn't. I sent him a photo. Still nothing. I dug a little deeper after that. Calvin had no known family listed, no stable address. When his parole officer checked the place he was supposed to be staying, he wasn't there. He had vanished. I wished that was the end. About a month later, someone rang the doorbell at my girlfriend's apartment at night. It was around 10:30. I went to answer, thinking it was a mistake. No one was there. But when I looked down the street, I saw someone walking away. Same height, same build. Maybe Calvin. Maybe not. It was too dark to be sure. I shouted. The person didn't turn around. They just kept walking. I didn't chase them. People walked in that neighborhood at night sometimes, and I couldn't prove it was him. But I locked the door and stayed awake until morning. I never found out what happened to Calvin. It was like he disappeared completely. What still bothers me is not just that he knew where I lived. It's that he may have found my girlfriend's place too. And worst of all, I still don't know how he knew about my brother, my mother, or where she lived. Sometimes I imagine him showing up at my mother's house one night while I'm not there. That thought keeps me awake. I don't know why he chose me. I don't know what game he was playing. All I know is that some people walk into your life for no clear reason, learn things they should never know, and leave you looking over your shoulder for years. I tell myself, maybe Calvin got arrested somewhere else. Maybe he's locked up under another name. Maybe he moved on. That hope is one of the only things that helps me sleep, because the alternative is believing he's still out there, and that one day he might decide to come back.